Stay tuned now for Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses with my co-host John Ardina Stewart and Charles Stern. Guys, how are you?
I'm fine. I woke up to the sound of people banging on my roof today. Lowe's has finally come through.
You're doing okay, Peter. Holding it together.
I'm holding it together.
Yeah. I'm a little overcome with sadness from yesterday's thing with the helicopter crash. I mean, that was just too much to absorb. But other than that,
it was.
Okay.
I was completely stunned, and I was equally sadly surprised, although I shouldn't have been, that Mike Lupica, who fancies himself a modern day Dick Young, decided that his column, which he only does one a week now, in the Sunday Daily News, and it's usually some long-winded diatribe about something or another. But today they gave him an extra one, and half of the column was about the incident that took place in 2003 where Kobe had intimate relations with a woman who believed that it was non-consensual, and Kobe finally, after months, understood that it was non-consensual. And there's a time and a place to bring that up.
Exactly.
But the within hours, because this was posted online last night.
Right, and that has no relationship to his passing.
It's part of his legacy, if you will. And it's not a footnote to his legacy.
There's an expression, it's not the time.
Exactly.
It's not the time.
It's not the time.
But in the age that we live in, you see, we like to blame bad behavior on the politics in our country. We like to say, I mean, people like me anyway, I am a liberal Democrat. And so when things go off the rails on social media, my quick fix is, well, Trump has ruined America and people have gone to their corners and it's disgusting and disgraceful. But Mike Lupica was not influenced by social media, I don't think, to raise that issue in last night's column. By the way, the column that appeared last night and the one that was printed in the paper, in the physical paper today, were not the same.
You're talking about Post now?
No, Daily News.
Daily News, okay.
We're not the same. It was much higher up last night, but he did some filler graphs before he got to it for the physical paper. So as far as some people are concerned, no harm, no foul.
Right.
But it was out there.
Right.
And I decided not to share it last night because I just thought it was too much.
Well, he was probably told to tone it down because I'm sure that there were a lot of repercussions.
Right.
You know, it just reminds me of a quote from Ed Koch. Ed Koch was in the elevator once, and a reporter asked him. This is after Koch was out of office. He became a reporter, kind of adjunct reporter.
He became a reviewer.
A reviewer, and a reporter said to him, "Well, Mr. Koch, how do you feel about being part of media, being a journalist?" And Koch turns around, looks at him, and he says, "I hate us."
Yeah, and he did.
And that's what it is.
Koch was an ornery man.
But the point I'm trying to make is that when somebody like Lupica decides to take that moment of Kobe Bryant's death to talk about who Kobe was cohabitating with, it's
a cheap shot that he could have waited. That could have waited till next Sunday's newspaper.
So, Peter, to lighten it up a little, I will say this to you. Okay, I'm not a huge sports person. I don't. My kids follow it. I'm not so much. But I know who Kobe Bryant is, and when it happened, I thought, wow, I want to hear from Bob Costas because that's a guy.
I heard him on CNN, he was incredible.
He was great.
He waxed on. Yes. I mean, he is lyrical without having to write it down.
Well, this is just the reason I'm bringing it up, just to end on an upper this topic. Bob Costas has a way of going on about these subjects, and even if you're not into sports, which I'm not, you can connect. Because he humanizes the story, he humanizes the events.
He does.
And he has a tone that's just enjoyable and very easy to connect with. So it made me feel better hearing Bob Costas talk about it.
Me too. He was a calming influence. We do have a guest named Lisa Genn today, and we're going to talk to her. But before we go to the break, I also wanted to acknowledge that today is... I'm sorry, Lisa. We're going to have to get to you in the second quarter hour. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. 75 years ago, right around today, Auschwitz was liberated, and so the Allies could no longer hide behind the lie that they didn't know and that this wasn't taking place. And it's a very personal day for all of us who lost family, and I'm sure, Lisa, you're in that number who lost family. Your family was from Russia, right?
Yes.
And today's it's a sad day, but to me, Holocaust Remembrance Day is both frustrating and sad, because while it's wonderful that all these international leaders are getting together to do some hand-wringing, what happened in the early 30s before we got to Auschwitz is happening again today. And these countries are doing little or nothing to ameliorate the anti-Semitism and anti-Islam and anti-immigrant statutes that they're all considering as part of their general way of doing business. Anyway, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some much more positive things. This is Westchester I on the radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. We'll be right back after a Fox commercial break with their news and their business news.
Let's return to Westchester I on the radio with Peter Moses on 1460 WVOX.
This is Charlie. You're listening to Westchester I on the radio, and we have a very special guest today. Her name is Lisa Genn. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're here and what organization you represent and some of the things, because I know you do more than one thing.
I do many things.
There's more than one Lisa. Tell us a little bit about
That's also true.
What you do and why you want to be talking to people on Westchester I on the radio.
Sure. So before I kind of launch into a list of all of my affiliations, which is somewhat lengthy, I want to go back to what we mentioned right before the break, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Because in a coincidence, or perhaps not a coincidence, today I'll be submitting a grant application for an amazing foundation called the Tzal Kaplun Foundation, which is planning to create an interactive map of all of the Holocaust killing sites in the Ukraine, and to create an archive and a repository of information and data and photographs of physical artifacts that will be disappearing in the next few years if they're not preserved right now, as well as witness interviews, survivor interviews with people who also will be gone very soon and whose memories need to be preserved for generations to come. So the reason why I bring this up is because people always want to know what they can do. And I want to tell you how I came to be doing that, because I just met the man that I'm working with, Joseph Menaker, over the phone. I've never met him in person, a couple of days ago, because I went on Facebook and I said, friends, I feel like lately a lot of my dreams have been coming true, and I'm getting to engage in the world in precisely the way I want to be. And can I help some of your dreams come true? And a few people from different parts of my life wrote to me. A friend sister from high school, a neighbor with different dreams, and said, you mentioned you do grant writing, you mentioned that you can do editing. My son is taking AP English. Could you tutor him? And I said yes to everything. And so one of those requests came from a new friend in Dobbs Ferry who said, my dad has this incredible foundation with this incredible map project, but he's not a grant writer, and he's got a deadline coming up like right now. And I said, let's talk. So we're putting in a really strong grant application that I'm proud of. And we did it collaborating over the phone on a couple of days' notice. And I hope that I can help make his dream come true.
What is your background?
Also quite varied. So I was an English and poli-sci major at Columbia. Then I worked as an editor.
I knew it was Ivy League.
I'm not stealthy. Oh no, that's not a compliment. Okay, well, I'm going to try to get my rabble-rousing bona fides back from you.
My best friends both have degrees from Columbia, and one of them is a full professor at the medical school, and the other one runs the hospital's computer department.
So some of us are actually good people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow, great. So
do you know what the Columbia?
Oh wow.
Some of my best friends are Ivy Leaguers.
Okay, well, I'll take that as a veiled threat.
I dated a crazy Barnard student once, but
oh my gosh! Well, I have a lot of Barnard friends because I'm also a dancer. So more on that later.
I saw that.
And I lived at Barnard for 4 years. My wife was a residence hall director.
Oh my goodness!
Yes.
Wow.
Well, you were living the Columbia boy's dream, just off timed. So So I worked at Foreign Affairs Magazine as an editor, as an assistant then associate editor. Then I went to law school at NYU. I clerked for a federal judge. I sued banks at the height of the financial crisis for 3.5 years, which was really being part of history. And I did it with Andrew Weissman, who has been famous for many things, including being Robert Mueller's right-hand man in this era subsequently. And then I worked at 2 different civil rights organizations. So my last legal work was in 2012, and I was working at the Brennan Center for Justice. But then I left for some complex reasons having to do with the kinds of work environments that sometimes really well-intentioned people create when there's a lot of ego and a lot of drive to be competitive, even with your colleagues, that really didn't resonate with me and didn't bring out my own best work. So I went on a different journey, and I left the workplace, and I had my 2 kids, and I had them 15 months apart, which did not make it easier to go back to work. You'd be shocked to learn. But I had a backstop in my life, and that was the nonprofit organization I still run called House of the Roses Volunteer Dance Company. And what we do is dance and creative movement workshops with children in homeless shelters.
Have you ever heard of the Battery Dance Company?
That is where we rehearse, in Chinatown, on the 5th floor.
I wrote a 3-part scenario, a Holocaust scenario.
Oh, wow.
That I'm forgetting his name, the guy who founded the Battery Dance Company. We gave it the title "Light from Dead Stars."
Wow.
And so that's my connection to dance.
Yeah, no, we've been rehearsing there for years because it's one of the most affordable theater spaces, dance rehearsal spaces still.
And it's downtown.
It's downtown.
I think it's 280 Broadway or something like that.
You got it, 5th floor.
Yeah.
So you can ring the buzzer and get very, very lightheaded and very tired and have gotten your entire exercise in before you even start dancing. So
since you are involved in the arts and many other things, I mean, there has been an attempt to organize political art exhibits in Westchester County. I think part of the problem is that a lot of the venues are afraid to host political art exhibits because they're afraid of backlash. How active have you or have your various organizations been in organizing political protest art exhibits?
It's a great question, and it actually speaks to something that I myself am about to embark on, which is a kind of a political theater. I think people are really afraid of backlash, but I think they're afraid not just of backlash, I think they're actually afraid of speaking dangerous truths. And we live in an era where people are saying their deepest fears into hollow logs. They're telling them to therapists and psychiatrists if they can afford those people, and those people are sworn to secrecy. So when people say, I fear that we're on the brink of autocracy, I fear that I'm no longer an activist, but I'm borderline a dissident, and I come from a totalitarian society, so I know what I'm saying. I say it advisedly. If I say those things into the silent chambers of my therapist's office, other people still feel alone. And that's what's going on. People are sharing it maybe with their partners, maybe not even with their partners.
The therapist's office sounds very frightening.
I think a lot of therapists are having secondary trauma from what they call the Trump effect. And I have a lot of therapist friends who say in this era, they have seen a major spike in people's anxiety and depression due to the apocalyptic circumstances that we find ourselves in. And they are sworn to secrecy and they cannot share their own grief because they usually agree with their clients and feel the same way.
But then how do you rally people to step out beyond their fear and to challenge their fear and to go forward? Because if everybody sits in the, if everybody has the ostrich effect, then nothing gets done.
So I have a 2-part answer. So one of the quotes that has given me a lot of inspiration in my life is a Martin Luther King quote, and it actually has often been used in the context of mental health as well, about being creatively maladjusted. This idea that all therapists and psychiatrists want us all to be well-adjusted, but there are some things in our society that we should never adjust ourselves to, and that is injustice and the intolerable things around us. So we should be creatively maladjusted to certain things in our world. And I think the people who are best positioned to be creatively maladjusted are people who have an outsider's perspective, which I do.
So we have
Lisa Genn.
A few seconds. Lisa Genn is our guest on the Westchester Eye on the Radio. Peter, I'm thinking I've got about 20 seconds to go here.
You can stretch it a little bit there.
And so we're going to come back after this break. We're going to hear some more from Lisa Genn. It's fair to say a renaissance woman of many different talents and capabilities and interests.
Academic
Don't embarrass
CV.
me on the air. Don't embarrass me. I didn't mean to read my resume.
Well, we wanted you to.
You like me better after the break.
Let's return to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses on 1460 WVOX.
And here we are again, folks. We are into our second half hour of Westchester Eye on the Radio. I am Mardina Stewart, along with Peter Moses, Charles Stern, and our special in-house guest, Lisa Genn, who is an activist in many, many ways, an activist through dance, an activist through law, an activist through social media. And we were talking about just the general, I don't know how to characterize it, folks. I think it's just this general malaise about our political malaise and how we can extricate ourselves from that malaise into action, also with the possibility that we could be facing another 4 years of Orange Man in office.
Right.
You know, how do we? We won't be able to change the president. So how then do we change ourselves and our strategy?
Those are very good questions.
Yeah, they're really deep questions, and they're questions with which I've been wrestling without realizing it my whole adult life in this country, as I've seen this society become increasingly alienated and polarized and lonely and disaffected, and we saw this sort of angry. We've had Prozac Nation, we've had Bowling Alone, we've had all of these canaries in the coal mine long before Trump saying that something is really rotten in the state of the United States, and that those conditions gave rise to Trump. Trump didn't create our problems. He's a manifestation of our problems. And so as we're now sitting where we are, I think part of the malaise you're talking about is we don't know if we're on the brink of something or whether we're inside it. We don't know if we are already living in something like an autocracy or an authoritarian regime, or if we're just about to be on the precipice of it. And that's something that historians who cover totalitarianism talk about, because we are all the people who can make it so or not so. Because if we start living as though we're already in a totalitarian regime, we make it so. And we do that by not speaking our truth to each other, by being silent, by being alienated, by being not in community with each other, by stopping to engage socially, by not reaching out to friends to check if they're okay. All of those actions make it such that this is already an autocracy, because in a healthy civil society, we would have interdependence and communal action and mutual support.
No, Charles, do you have something you want?
Well, the only thing I can say is you said something a minute ago, Lisa, that I agree with, which is that all of these problems to some degree were here before Donald Trump. They've been around for a long time.
Yes.
And I think that, Ardina also makes a good point, which is that it is very possible that Congress will not acquit, that he will be acquitted, right? The Senate will be found not guilty in the Senate trial. Right. That is very likely to happen, and that he could get reelected. And we find ourselves in this situation for another 4 years. So I guess what I'm saying is, you can't just curl up into a ball. No. Life has to go on. People's lives need to continue on, and you can't allow yourself to be completely crushed by it. I don't believe that we are living in an authoritarian, totalitarian state today. We have to be able to, there has to be some hope for the future, or else we just all disintegrate.
Well, right. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. There is a template given to us by way of the Constitution that gives us direction as to how we can remedy political situations. Have we, as a society, abdicated our mandate to exercise that template? I think that a lot of people don't realize that you do have a recourse, that you do have ways that you can say, okay, this can't happen. I mean, even if that means lobbying our political representatives, which we don't do enough.
Right.
Well, let's be a little more concrete about this. Okay, so there is going to be an election in 2020 for president. And
we believe
approximately
that's right.
42.
There may not be.
In about 42 out of those 50 states, we sort of know what the outcome is going to be. And in 8 or 10 states, there's an opportunity to swing one way or the other.
Michigan, Wisconsin, and Virginia and Pennsylvania will tell the tale.
Ohio, maybe Florida.
Maybe Ohio.
So there's a few of them. We sort of know what they are. So, what I'd be interested in hearing from you, Lisa, because I know you're an activist on top of everything else, is, what's going on in those 8 or 10 states, those 40 or so counties where there could be some actual impact on the outcome of the election. That, and by the way, I don't expect everything to be perfect even after the Democrats get elected in 2020.
That's right.
So
our problems are deep.
So where does the activist community aim its spear?
Well, there have been so many questions that I'm so dying to, like a lawyer, I'm dying to like go back and say, Your Honors, I want to go back to all your questions. I do want to say one word about curling up into a ball, because some people are going to curl up into balls, and many people already have, and I have been one of them. So if I'm sitting here right now, sparkly and bushy-tailed and with all these projects, that doesn't mean that 3 months ago I was not in a depressive episode. That's where we are as a country, and people need to be saying that truth out loud. So if you're not in a ball right now, but your friend is, one great thing you can do that doesn't make you a dissident and doesn't put you in harm's way is to reach out to your friend and invite them over for dinner and just meet them where they are and be a good friend, because that's something we all need to do for each other. Everybody has the right to curl up into a ball right now, and it doesn't make anybody a bad person that they feel the cataclysmic environment that we're in. It's the reality. So in terms of might Trump get elected, there are a few scenarios. He certainly might get reelected. He may seek to postpone the election and try to re-energize the war with Iran or do something else that will create a state of emergency declared and try to postpone it. Or he may lose and refuse to concede. And in that situation, we very easily could have a mini military coup where...
But we won't. That won't happen, I don't believe.
Well... The reason
I
why
hear what Lisa's saying. I hear what Lisa's saying. I've heard this one before, and I think there might be something to it, and I think that might be why there's such a strong sense of urgency to get rid of him right now, because there is a sense that this guy is loony enough and surrounded by enough supporters that he might not smoothly concede.
So that brings me back to Ardina's earlier question about have we abdicated our responsibility to defend the Constitution, and this is what I'd say about that. I come from a totalitarian society that was lacking in the freedoms that Americans have. And people like me who've come here have been amazed to see our fellow Americans give their freedoms away because they don't understand what they are. Because in this incredible experiment that's American democracy, we haven't been so sorely tested. So people in a desire to punish their supposed enemies are punishing themselves. They're saying, no freedom speech for Lisa, not realizing that they're going down right with me. And so I am seeing Americans give it away, but it's not because they knowingly abdicate. They don't realize what it is they're giving away and how powerful it is, that we need to unite around our freedoms, even when we disagree, because there, but for the grace of God go I, right after my neighbor that I sold out.
So then do we need community leaders who can advise people about their rights, their political rights? Now, should it come from, I know it's not supposed to come from the churches.
Public schools. And our public schools are not raising citizens because we're not doing civics education in this country, and that's very much on purpose. And I'm going to sound like Elizabeth Warren. I have a plan for that. And I want to transition a little bit to talking about my projects because I want to make sure I don't leave the show without giving your listeners a few really concrete, great ideas for how they can engage, and in ways, some of which are nonpartisan and are not going to put them potentially in harm's way with employers or angry neighbors. I think it's really important for people to be very honest with themselves about the level of risk they're willing to take in this era. And I have come from a very iconoclastic tradition. I come from generations of rabble-rousers. My grandmother was American, was a journalist for the Chicago Sun-Times in the 30s. She went to the Soviet Union on her honeymoon, liked the Soviet Union better than her husband, divorced, went back because she was interested in nascent feminism in a socialist society, met my grandfather with whom she didn't have a common language and stayed. You know, this is my bloodline. So I come from fierce, fierce women, and not everybody has to be alike. I think some people are by nature less overtly political. I'm very much a firebrand, or I've come into my power in this era as a firebrand. I haven't always been that way. And people should manifest their strength and their power in whatever way is aligned with their own identity. So here are some ideas specifically about civic education. I am launching, and it's official as of my saying it out loud, because I think we have to say our truths out loud to make them real, a civic empowerment project aimed at young voters of color in my communities. Because here's the gap that I see. There are a lot of voter registration drive campaigns, and there are a lot of get out the vote campaigns. And what they're not seeing, which I've seen because I've knocked on thousands of doors and I've met 18-year-old registered Democrats who are Black and Latino What they're not seeing is that these young people register as Democrats when they turn 18, and they don't vote because, unlike so many American voters who are ignorant and don't care, they're self-conscious and they need to know how to think about their vote. What's party line voting? What does the polling place look like? They're too embarrassed of their ignorance because their schools haven't taught them how to think about voting. And I want to create a project that will empower these young voters to exercise a meaningful choice in our elections and participate in our democracy.
And let's talk about that on the other side of the break, because I'd like to get your thoughts on the Black youth vote, to expand expand that and to see what kind of implications, what kind of impact that could have on the next election, and how people can kind of galvanize to create an even stronger force. People have questions. Peter's going to kill me. You can call 914-636-0110.
Let's return to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses on 1460 WVOX.
We are back. Thanks for sticking with us, folks. I'm Mardina Sewell, along with Peter Moses, Charles Stern, and our in-studio guest, Lisa Genn, who is a community activist, and she's a political community activist. It's all bundled up into getting things right. And I just want to announce that next week we're going to have Jamal Bowen on the air. Jamal will be in studio, and he is running against Elliot Engel. Now, that being said, we want to talk about upcoming political races, which there are several in the Westchester County area and beyond. We have Kristen Browdy, we have Mondaire, Charles,
Mondaire Jones. He's running in NY Congressional District, NY 17.
That's right.
And Browdy's in 93.
And Browdy is in Assembly
Westchester.
District, New York Assembly District 93. And but it's a quick plug here. If you go to redbluetalk.com, I just posted a spreadsheet that's got all of the candidates who are running against each other in the open seat that Nita Lowey is leaving behind after 17 terms.
17 at current count.
Right, in Congress.
So now there's a song running through my head that pops in when we talk about these upcoming political elections, and it's called "What Have You Done for Me Lately?" So, what have they done for us lately, and why should they be? Why should we elect them?
I think that we're discovering a little bit later than I would have liked that not all Democrats are made alike. And to me, that this is the theme of all of these elections. I'm a huge believer in primaries. We should have competition. Voters should have a choice. That's little d democracy. Talk about what gets people activated and energized. It's choices in elections. So I am supporting, for Nita Lowey's seat, the most progressive candidate in the race, who's Mondaire Jones. He would be the first openly gay black man ever elected to Congress. But that's not all. He's somebody for whom policy is personal. He has lived it himself in his own life, raised by a single mom, Section 8 housing, food stamps. She worked multiple jobs. He watched his grandmother clean homes because there was no child care that she could afford. And so as he grew up and then went on to Stanford and the Obama administration and then Harvard Law School, he took all of that experience with him. And so when he talks about representing the needs not just of privileged white people like me, but of the whole county and of immigrants who need a path to citizenship, of people of color and poor people who need transportation infrastructure, that's personal and it's going to dictate how hard he fights. Same with climate change. He's 32. He's going to see this play out in his own lifetime. That's going to dictate how hard he fights. And that's what we should be looking for in our elected officials.
How powerful is the black youth vote in terms of the total component? In other words, what I'm saying is if you could get a block, if one could organize a block of a black youth vote, could that swing an election?
Well, I'm not a statistician, but here's what I do know and think. We have horrendous voter participation in this country, and when it comes to young people of color in particular, they often, sometimes, I shouldn't say often, but sometimes they are the first voters in their families. They are disproportionately more likely to have a parent who's incarcerated, who's been stripped of their right to vote, or who's still in jail at the time. For young Latinx voters, they're more likely to have parents who are undocumented or not citizens who can't show them the way. So they need to be empowered.
And the Republicans are doing everything they can to make sure that they can't vote.
To suppress the vote through voter intimidation and voter suppression laws, and then to send poll watchers to the polls to target people of color. So our young people need to be forearmed with information about how to choose how to vote, how to make sense of the three branches of government. These are things the public schools in a functioning democracy would teach that they have not taught for years. So that's where my civic literacy project fits in, and I don't have time to describe it in detail, but if you're interested, let me just give my contact information now for anything that I'm working on. I need colleagues. And by colleagues, I mean one day I hope to have funding for this project, and I'm going to be actively applying for funding. But in the meantime, people of good conscience who are looking for a way to engage, please write to me at Elizabeth, ELISABETH, Genn, @gmail.com, or you can call me at 917-657-2006.
So that non-white youth voting bloc that you're talking about, it will not be as easy to organize as it sounds. To the extent that I've understood it, it's not monolithic. It is not all as left-leaning as you might expect, especially the Latino population. Many of these people are Catholic. And
Young voters are a little bit different.
There are issues that the left will have to address in order to bring everybody together.
That's a really good point, yeah.
Which is something that kind of grates on my nerves, how the Democratic Party has become a kind of circular firing squad. There's so many factions within the Democratic Party. Democratic centrist, Democratic leftist, Democratic uber left, uber right. It doesn't look, it's not a cohesive unit. So when Charles talks about the black youth vote not being homogenous, then what do we do? How do we galvanize our political platform when you've got all these different moving parts within the Democratic Party?
Well, here's what I'd say. Circular firing squad is definitely a problem to the extent that we are not compassionate and unkind to each other in our discourse. But the fact that we have a variety of ideas in an era where the earth is literally on fire doesn't surprise me, right? Everybody's terrified that if we go too left, we'll lose. If we go too center, we'll lose. The circular firing squad idea comes from just the passion that people have for getting it right. And what I'm out here to say is I fall on the side of people who think that we need to go left, because both Democrats and Republicans have seen the American dream falling apart and slipping through the cracks for young people on their watch. And I recently met a man who's a Syrian immigrant who voted for Trump, and part of the reason why he did is because his son got into med school, the American dream, and he dropped out because of overwhelming student loans, and now his son works at Target. This immigrant of color voted for Trump because he said he's going to shake things up and end the forever wars. We have to not dehumanize and demonize all Trump supporters and understand that they're crying out for help in a lot of ways, and some of them are racist, and some of them believe horrible things, but they've also come to believe those horrible things because their country's falling apart and they don't know what to think. So we need to give them better things to think.
And we on the coasts do not understand the heartland. And the Democratic Party.
I grew up outside of Chicago, so that's kind of sort of not.
Yes,
entirely.
but you're in Illinois,
right?
Which
and
is
outside of Chicago.
a Democratic state,
right?
And especially around Chicago. You said you grew up around Chicago,
right? Very diverse.
It's like saying
Westchester.
It's like saying, Texas is a red state, but then there's Austin,
right?
So I don't think it's so simple. I think some of these Midwestern states defy understanding, because why would Minnesota start turning right? Why would Wisconsin start turning right? Well, they elected, or one of them elected a governor who didn't respect the rights of workers.
I have one word.
Walker.
One word for Minnesota. You know what turned Minnesota right? Somalians. That's what the problem was. So all of a sudden, you're talking about a state that was relatively, it looked like Scandinavia, and then overnight, you've got not only black people, but Somalians coming from a totally different culture, moving in. You've got black people being elected to office, and
scared the heck out of them.
It scared the heck out of them, and that's why they got whiplash looking around saying, "Oh my God, look what's happening to our state." So that's why they turned right, because it was a reaction.
Let's face what this is all about. In 50 years, this country will be a completely different place. This is the last stand. This is the last great stand of a white majority. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's lasting. It's come up. I mean, Obama scared these white Christian men and their wives so much that we have this move to the right beyond which made any sense at the time that it started moving. Electing an African-American president created a dissonance in how Americans who aren't living on the coast think of their country. And the fact that raised the hackles of all the racism that was
Yes.
already there and now bubbles to the surface is a frightening thing.
Well, this is what MLK had to say about this in the early 1960s. He said, segregation is on its deathbed, but how much are we going to have to pay for the funeral? And we are about to find out, because in 50 years, this country will be predominantly different shades of brown.
Right.
But whether we will be living under entrenched minority rule, which the Mitch McConnells of this country, and specifically Mitch McConnell, are doing their absolute best to ensure, or whether we'll be a thriving democracy, depends on what we do in this moment.
That's true.
And on that note, we're coming to the end of our show. I know, Lisa, you said that you wanted to let the audience know about organizations that
Yes.
you are.
Really quickly, I think it's so important to give credit and a shout out to the people who've inspired and trained you. I wouldn't be a full-time political organizer if I didn't shadow people who inspired me, like Tom Thacker and Peter Bernstein of Irvington Activists, an amazing group that has really been my incubator and training ground for my ideas. Postcard Mondays, a group of just badass women who get together over baked goods and write postcards for democracy. Indivisible River Towns in Westchester, Concerned Families of Westchester, stalwarts from the Vietnam War era, incredible organizations, and I hope you look into them, and I hope you contact me to help.
And on that, we're going to have to end our program today. Thank you for being a guest, Lisa, again.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
And Charles Stern is going to be back with us next week
I'll be back for another guest host experience.
for another guest host experience with Jamal Bowen. Charles is going to give us his political expertise and his hard-hitting analysis.
Well, there's all these people running for Congress, so it's like we're going to keep track of it.
17 in my district alone. Good luck.
So that's it for today, folks. Have a great week and hang in there.